Hi there, this is Brent Hearis, your personal coach, also your productivity coach. I still go back and forth between the two titles because I cannot decide. I want to make a video for you on the subject of fear, how to release fear, and importantly, how to recognize it, how to know what it is, how to disidentify from it, and thereby release it so that you can exist free of fear. Does that sound good? Cool, let's go for it. So before we get started, we need to define the terms. So when I talk about fear, which by the way, it would also include stress and anxiety, nervousness, like all these, for the purposes of this video, we're just gonna lump that all under the name of fear. Fear, there's kind of a big argument about it, and this argument creates the stickiness around fear. Like, if we can clear up this argument and really discern between the element of fear that is useful and that which is not useful, when we can make that distinction, then we can really separate the corn from the cob. We can really separate the baby from the bathwater, and we can keep what's useful and discard what is not. And as I'm sure you can assume, even as we go into this discussion, that the great bulk of fear is not useful. It does not serve us in any particular way. So, when is fear useful? Fear is useful when there is a threat in your midst, when there is a threat in reality. So, for example, you're in the jungle and there's an anaconda or a cougar or spider, or whatever the threats are in jungles, or if there's something charging at you, or if you're in a dark alley and someone's threatening you, like when there's an actual threat, fear is really useful and really appropriate, because then the kidneys will release the adrenaline, you'll get into the fight or flight mode, and then you can do a lot of superhuman stuff. And that is my cat. I am so sorry. I think she's gonna sit. Are you gonna sit, baby? Ah, perfect. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. Okay, that should be good enough. Great. Okay, this is good. Good situation. So that is when fear is useful. Now, fear is only useful when there is an actual threat present. Now, our issue is that, seeing as a species, we've become a very thought-oriented species, and we do a lot of thinking, and we put a lot of emphasis on thinking, and the majority of us, we actually cognize our lives through our thought. So in other words, like, we live through thought, and in some cases, in some extreme cases, we mistake our thoughts for reality. We mistake the menu for the food, as it were. And we mistake our judgments for the actual thing that is being judged, which can create, of course, a lot of confusion. Stress, fear, and anxiety are all what we go through when we are afraid of a potential outcome that may appear in our reality. In other words, we are experiencing real, in this moment right now, fear about something that is not real in the most bottom-most fundamental sense. It's really interesting when you look at it this way, because there are tons and tons of us that live in our homes and sleep in comfortable beds, and we're frozen with fear and frozen with nervousness, and we can't get to sleep because we're afraid about this and that, and something that might happen that night or the next day or the next week or whatever. And these are all, very importantly, imagined threats that we're reacting to right now. So what happens is, in order to mitigate the fear, in order to attempt to make ourselves feel better, what we usually do is we go through the mind and we start creating preparations, or like flow charts almost, for any threat, for the threat that emerges. So for example, suppose the fear is, I'm afraid somebody's going to come into my house and rob me or kill me or something. and there's no real evidence to suggest that it's actually going to happen. It's just a fear, and we're all generally in agreement that it's irrational, but nevertheless it's an actual fear. What we would do in order to make the fear go away is we would start to think, okay, well, what I'm going to do is if somebody comes in through that door, then I'm going to go over this way. And if somebody comes in through the window, then I'm going to go over this way and you know, get out that way. And then we start creating like ever more complicated logic trees so that we accumulate more and more data that is supposed to make us feel safe and yet never quite gets us there, but instead causes us to overflow with more and more data. It's interesting because the threats are created by our minds in the sense that we feel threatened by a thought in our head. You know, we feel threatened by like a potential outcome that we just came up with. And what's important here is that, like, suppose there was an actual outcome that is going to happen. Like suppose you have reason to believe that you're in a kind of a winter village, you know, in the mountains, and like there's a lot of snow on the mountains, and it's spring, and there's a thaw, and there's the threat of an avalanche where you are. What you would do is you would assess the threat, and you'd ask yourself, okay, well, am I safe here? What's, you know, as far as I can tell, what's the probability of the snow falling on my house and trapping us in? And you look at it and you're like, okay, you know, it hasn't happened in 200 years. It's probably not going to happen, you know, and, you know, yeah, I feel reasonably confident that we're okay. Or I'm going to move and we're going to live somewhere else in order to keep ourselves safe. And so in a situation such as this, you are making a choice and being done with it. And there's no actual requirement for fear, even if there is some kind of a maybe kind of threat. Because the idea is, what most of us would do in a situation like that is we would either choose to leave the scenario, but then go with a sense of doubt, like, oh my God, I'm making a big deal out of nothing, and oh, I'm being so silly right now, I shouldn't have moved, this is so much trouble. Or you'd stay and it's like, oh my God, I don't feel safe, I really should move, I really should move, I should move, but you just kind of stay there nonetheless. Isn't that interesting? So we're kind of hedging our bets. We're both here and there. And because we kind of remain on the fence, we don't really fall on one side or the other. We stay in fear, and it's remaining on the fence. That's what perpetuates the state of fear. And the technique that I'm going to get to, that I suppose I should just get to right now, is to make these decisions and to choose for good. What is it that you're doing? And then you make a choice, and then as soon as the choice is done, you be done with it. And you stop taking the choice back off of the shelf after you've made it, which is a huge no-no if wellness and peace and happiness are what you're going for. You know, you dust it off and you, oh no, I don't know, should I, shouldn't I? More pros and cons, and more, and then you have like 100 pros and 100 cons. And what we end up doing is, with our minds, we make all of this complexity. That's what the mind does, is it just makes complexity, but never quite gets there, but promises that you will get there with just a little bit more data. You need to think more, learn more, consult more people, read more books, think about it some more. Data is useful. It's absolutely useful. If you're living in that winter village in the mountains, yeah, you'd want to collect data on like the likelihood of the avalanche, you know, and look at the history and look at the metrics and look at, you know, what other ways can be done to mitigate the threat. But you usually come to the end of that quite quickly. You know, you ask all the relevant questions and you get as certain as you possibly can, and then you make the most intelligent decision that you can possibly make and stick with it until something useful comes along, until something really, and you're no longer looking for more data, but, you know, if something comes in to really like, oh, you know, actually, you know, snow doesn't really land on these mountains anymore, and there's no threat of an avalanche anymore, like that kind of thing. So I'd like to give another example to further illustrate the point that I'm making. And really, if we're to summarize the whole video and the whole thing that I'm offering here, is that you, in order to release fear, what you are to do is to take the irrational fear that you have, because on some level, fear, any fear that is not of a threat that's present right in your reality, right goddamn now, any of these fears are irrational. They're not, in the sense that they're not rational. They're not based in reality. There's no reality supporting these fears. If you discover that you have an irrational fear, which again is most fears, what I would recommend that you do is you go easy on yourself and be kind to yourself. Because even though you know on an intellectual kind of adult level that you're safe, the part of you that feels threatened really does feel threatened and really doesn't understand that there's no threat. Like it really feels like it's gonna die. And that's why you can react so strongly in situations where you're utterly safe. So, it's not really helpful to, go, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. Obviously not, but it's there. So let's be kind with ourselves. So the way to release the fear is, you look at what you're afraid of and look at what you're sincerely afraid is what's going to happen. And take a minute to figure that out. And then ask yourself, is this true? And what's kind of cool is you switch to the adult mode, where you're taking like this primordial fear kind of out of the basement in a way and bringing it into the light for examination, not to be critical or to insult it or try to get rid of it or anything. What we're doing is we're really evaluating it to see if it's actually true or not. It's really, really interesting, because when we're able to make this link between the inner child, you could say, or the heart region, or just like the part of us that's scared, when you make a connection between that and your mind and your intelligence, and there's a congruency there, there's an opportunity to wake up and no longer be preparing yourself for a threat that is, in all likelihood, is never going to present itself. So I want to give you an example from my own life to kind of really drive the whole thing forward. So I play piano, and I sometimes am commissioned to play weddings or to play for other things besides weddings. Just like to play for people, to be an accompanist, just other kind of piano related stuff. I don't take it, I'm not too serious about it, but whenever an opportunity comes, I do it. And so I was commissioned recently to play for a wedding, which will be coming up for me. And I got a lot of advance notice about this wedding. And what I found was that whenever I would think about it, I would get very scared and I would get really freaked out. And if you were to ask me what I was freaked out about, I would say that I was afraid that I would mess up and I would create this awkward moment, and I'd kind of forget how to play. And then everybody would suddenly look at me, and I would have ruined the moment. This is a wedding, right? This is like kind of an important kind of high octane kind of moment that it really should go smoothly if it can. And so I was just kind of scared, but it was far enough in advance that I was not thinking about it. And then just in this last month, it's coming up quite soon, and so I need to start kind of preparing and practicing and so forth. But every time I'd start practicing, like my hands would get cold and sweaty, and like my heart would start going, and it's like, oh my God. And I did what I was recommending to you just now. I went through this exercise and I asked myself, what's wrong? What am I afraid of? Let's really look at it. And what I realized that I was afraid of is that I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. I'm not good enough for this wedding. And if I'm not ready, if I'm not prepared, it means that I'm not, if I show up to the event and I attempt to do it, I will fail. It won't be good, and I will have caused some kind of bad thing to happen. Now, what's really interesting is that at the same time, regardless of this fear that's there, I took the gig in the first place. Would I really have taken a gig that I didn't believe I was ready for? No. Would you enroll or sign up for some kind of thing that you feel like is not appropriate for you or that you're not qualified for in some way? No, you would not. So you could see I had two conflicting ideas that were holding me in nervousness and holding me in fear. There was a part of me that believed that I'm not qualified for this event, and there's this other part of me that knows that I'm qualified, and that knows. And the reason why I say no is because I ask myself, is this true that I'm not ready? And looking at it with all of my scrutiny and in all my sobriety, and I'm really going for the truth, and it could go either way. Is this true? I'm not qualified. I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. False. It's false. It's a lie. I am ready. So then from there, it's, am I willing to let myself know this? Am I willing to get off the fence and pick a side? And the answer is yes, because I'm done being afraid. And so I fell on the side of, I'm ready, because it's true. There's a part of me that felt like it might be valuable to maybe suspect that I'm not ready, because that would, force me to prepare a lot and thus be over ready and over prepared and trying to make myself safe by practicing a whole bunch. And I hope you see the overlays here from the earlier discussion. But it's like, no, I'm going to practice the right amount. And that's what I've been doing. And there's nothing to be afraid of. This is the right opportunity for me. So even as I tell you the story now, it's if I was at 100% fear, say a couple weeks ago, I would say right now, I'm at 2%, even as I tell you this story. But I can keep looking for lies and falsity that I bought along the way and keep bringing it into the light. So as a parting gift to, what's the takeaway of this video? I'd like to wrap it up. I'd like to start getting videos in under 20 minutes. That's my new objective. The takeaway is this. Look into your experience now and ask yourself, is there fear? The answer is usually yes. Typically, like in all people, is there nervousness? Is there anxiety? Is there worry? Anywhere in my experience, it could be light, it could be heavy, it could be about something like right now, or it could be something, about that you're kind of nervous about over the upcoming weeks or years or something. And so whatever that is, just focus on one fear and then ask yourself. It's actually really helpful to type or write it out. I type it personally. And you go, what am I afraid of? And put in quotation marks like, I'm afraid that blank. I'm afraid I'm going to run out of money. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I'm afraid I'm going to get dumped. I'm afraid I'm going to be alone forever. I'm afraid no one likes me. I'm afraid my friends, wish I was not around. I'm afraid that I'll never be happy or fulfilled. Whatever it is. And put that there and then create a new line. And then ask yourself, is this true? And the key here is to resist jumping into a conclusion. So resist jumping into, well, yeah, it's true, because no. So the thing is about fear is that we'll always have lots of data to support our fears. Not because the fears are true, but because when you think from a certain belief system for a long enough time, your beliefs get confirmed and you get more things to prove it right with. But just because a self-fulfilling prophecy has fulfilled itself. Let me try that one more time. Just because a self-fulfilling prophecy has fulfilled itself does not mean that it's true. It just means that it's a reality that you created. That's it. That's it. And you don't have to create reality that way if you don't want to. I think that's it. So you come out of it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the thread's gone. Oh, finally, yeah. Bring whatever it is, bring it into view and ask, is this true? And ask objectively. And if it's false, then stop believing it and let yourself know what's true be true. Catch you later. And marketing stuff. Please like these videos. Please like this video. If you care to comment, if you care to subscribe, if you think this would be useful for other people, I'd be so grateful if you did. And if you are interested in one-on-one work with me, if you'd like to set up a coaching session, you can get an intro session for free. You can try it out. We can talk about what's going on with you. It's a lot of fun. People get tons and tons of benefit out of it. No obligations to sign up for anything or hand over money. It's all easygoing. And if it is your desire to get coached and to allow me to assist you evolve into your higher self, it would be my great pleasure to do so. So I'll insert a link for that on the bottom so you can get yourself a session. And that is all. Catch you later. Bye.